Today's Cowboys Report is made possible by Manscaped. Get 20% off and free shipping on all their fantastic men's grooming products when you go to manscaped.com and you use promo code Cowboys. We've got some trade rumors, Stephon Gilmore, Xavien Howard, Jaylon Smith to get to. But first, a quick news update for you guys. Rashard Robinson has been released. Maybe bit of a surprise by the Cowboys on Saturday. Now, Robinson was suspended 2 games to start the season. He was probably not going to make the roster, like a very, very, very heavy long shot, if not the longest shot to make this roster for Dallas. This does open up a roster spot, which is intriguing with camp set to begin, in a couple days, the team flying out in just 2 days. But it does also trim down the cornerback room. Diggs, Brown, Lewis, Joseph, Wright, Goodwin, the now only Robinson on the roster, Reggie, Burton, and Maurice Kennedy all on the team. Not a major move, but definitely one worth mentioning. And I'll mention again here, does also set up a free roster spot, which I'm not sure the Cowboys fill before they get to camp in just a couple of days. Now, we are getting closer and closer to 100,000 subscribers here on the Cowboys Report. And we're going to keep you guys covered all throughout training camp. Everything going on, we're going to let you guys know what's going on. So if you want those updates for free, hit that big red button and subscribe today. Let's talk trade rumors now around the Cowboys. Really some speculation that keeps getting brought up, I see it on Twitter, on social media, everywhere. So I want to just recap all the 3 ones that I've seen and we'll discuss them when the feasibility of all the trades there. So first up, Xavien Howard, right? Blogging the boys throughout 3 different trades, which we'll get to here in a second. As I've mentioned many a time before, the cost of a trade, both the money involved and the draft capital / player capital, is a potential issue. Now, here were the 3 trade ideas that Blogging the boys threw out there. First up, of course, the Cowboys get Xavien Howard in all of these. Trade number 1, Dolphins get a 1st and a 4th round pick. Pretty expensive. Trade number 2, Miami gets Michael Gallup and a 2022 3rd round pick. And then trade number 3, the Dolphins get Amari Cooper and a late round pick as well. I think the number 1 problem with the latter 2 of those particular trades is that Miami doesn't need a receiver. Yes, the Cowboys are deep at the position, so I get why the mindset is there. But Miami drafted Jalen Waddle in round 1. They paid Will Fuller. They have Devontae Parker. They've got like 5 other guys who've spent time on a roster. Not sure receiver is a big-time need for them, but I appreciate Blogging the boys trying to give up value to get value for what I think would fetch at least the value of 1 first-round pick. So play GM for me right now, folks. Would you do at least 1 of the Xavien Howard trades? And we'll spend some more time on this topic here, but first get your votes in. Y for yes or N for no. I know we've mentioned Howard many a time on this show, and I want to just have it all wrapped up again for you guys with camp finally almost here. Howard's impact would be significant. He would be a true number 1 corner for a Cowboys team that still kind of needs one. Yes, he allowed 119 yards and 4 scores. He got targeted a decent amount, but he had 10 interceptions and 20 pass breakups. That's awesome play. And the reason why Howard appears to be unhappy in Miami is his contract status. When Howard signed his deal, he was the highest paid corner in the NFL. But as I've said many a time here, that does not always last. Howard is now no longer a top 5 highest paid corner. And even though he's got 4 years left on his deal, he's not that happy right now, and he wants to get paid more. That's an issue for Miami. It sets a very dangerous precedent. But if you were to bring in Xavien Howard, you take care of your cornerback issues. Between Howard, Diggs, Anthony Brown / Jordan Lewis in the nickel, and in theory, one of, if not both of Kelvin Joseph, Rashaad Wright, and maybe still Anthony Brown hanging out as your backup corners, I think I speak for everyone when I say I feel immensely more confident in that cornerback room. The problem is, and this is why I like the idea of including a corner in a trade, is if you bring Xavien Howard in, he and Diggs are your long-term outside guys. So then what do you do with your 2nd round pick this year? What is the role for Kelvin Joseph? This is the problem for me. You're balancing the sure thing in Xavien Howard versus what you invested already in with Kelvin Joseph. You could maybe try to trade him, You could move him to safety, nickel. He hasn't played those roles before. So I think the presence of Joseph, the drafting of 2 corners in the top 100, not to mention the expensive contract cost and the value the team would have to give up, is why I think a trade for a star cornerback is unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible. If Kelvin Joseph is bad in camp, I think the Cowboys look to bring in at least some semblance of veteran help. So I get why it's discussed, why I have so many people in the comment section on my Twitter DMs asking me about a potential trade. I understand it. I don't think it goes down in the end, but I do think it's worth discussing at least until we get further into camp, when at that point we will have a better feel for what the cornerback room really looks like short-term and maybe long-term as well for Dallas. Folks, go get yourself the new Lawnmower 4.0. They did it for Dak, and you can too. Manscaped.com is the URL, but use promo code COWBOYS at checkout. That will get you 20% off and free shipping on the Lawnmower 4.0 and all the best men's grooming products. To make your lives easier, I will put that link, by the way, and the promo code too, in the comment section and in the description. You can even go above and beyond and get yourself the new perfect package, Lawnmower 4.0, the most comfortable boxers known to man, and some other goodies, I'll call them, to help make yourself feel nice and fresh downstairs. Manscaped.com. Don't forget to use the promo code Cowboys. To the other big-name corner who may or may not be on the trade block, that's Stephon Gilmore. Of the two, I think Gilmore has a lower trade value. I also think is less likely to get dealt. I actually am leaning more and more towards Howard being dealt at this point. Gilmore also wants an expensive new deal, and there have been Stephon Gilmore trade whispers for months now around the Cowboys, at least speculation. More in depth than that, but first a quote from Gilmore to Josina Anderson. Quote, "I just want what I'm worth, however that plays out. Every player should be paid what they're worth. That's just how it is. Hopefully we can find some common ground and get it situated. I just know what I bring to the table and my style of play. Right now, I'm just trying to focus on myself and make sure I'm good mentally and physically." More on the physical stuff, but first the contract, right? I think Gilmore's benchmark to clear is probably the Darius Slay deal. Both those guys are a little bit older, both also very good corners, and in theory, if you were to trade for him, it would just be like a Darius Slay trade when the Lions dealt him to Philadelphia. Now, Gilmore's coming off a lesser season. He was not as good in 2020, due in part to injury, but put up Xavien Howard type of production back in 2019. So I love Gilmore, the player. Again, a lot of the same issues are still present. What are you doing with Kelvin Joseph? What situation are you putting yourself in as it relates to figuring out Nahshon Wright? All those other options. So I do think a trade is a little bit more doable for the Cowboys here than Xavien Howard because of the value. The cost is more manageable. I don't think Gilmore's trade value is as high as Xavien Howard's, due in large part to age. Maybe the contract's even a little bit cheaper. I think a good benchmark, a good example here, is the Julio Jones trade. Titans get Julio and a 6th-round pick. Falcons get him for a 2nd and a 4th. So I think 2nd and 4th is about the right value. But as someone who's trying to figure out what I'm doing long-term at corner, if you trade for Stephon Gilmore, that is a long-term and a short-term player. You're not going to bring him in for a 1-year rental. That does not make sense at that cost. At least I don't think for this Cowboys team. So frankly, I would try to include someone like a Kelvin Joseph. It ends up being a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. Now, I think if you had got Gilmore for a 2nd and a 4th before this year's draft, you'd be feeling pretty good about that. Now, maybe New England doesn't want Joseph. Maybe that causes some issues. But I think value-wise, you're in the right spot. Again, I think a trade is unlikely, but it is still worth discussing given the uncertainty at the cornerback position for the Cowboys. So who do you think is the better trade target? Type H for Xavien Howard or type in G for Stephon Gilmore. Get your votes in right now. Now for a trade candidate as opposed to a target for the Cowboys. Jaylon Smith, and I keep seeing this one mentioned by various outlets. FANSIDED the latest. They say Smith is one of the Cowboys' top trade candidates. I don't agree with this. Now, Smith is not a bad football player, but he has not lived up to expectations after his big-time extension. And I question if anyone out there really wants his $7.2 million base salary. Here's what FANSIDED wrote. Because of his age and production, Smith would undoubtedly attract interest on the trade market. Teams would probably jump at the chance to get him on the remaining 5 years of his contract. But how motivated would the Cowboys be to let him go? See, I don't agree with that. I don't think there's that much trade value right now for Jaylon Smith. $7.2 million is a lot to pay for a linebacker who, despite his raw tackle numbers, has not played as well as he did in 2018. He's regressed for 2 straight years. If you trade him, I think you're trading him at the lowest point of his value. Speaking of that, I want you guys to let me know what you think Jaylon Smith's trade value is. I'm thinking like draft pick. I don't think there's a major market right now at a fairly expensive contract, but I want you guys to get your votes in right now for me in the comments section. I think in general, we put way too much emphasis on raw tackle numbers. 154 sounds awesome. But what matters is how those tackles are being gained. Now, last year, behind a bad defensive tackle spot, it's not surprising Smith had just 5 tackles for loss. There were not enough opportunities for him to make big-time plays in the backfield. And even though he only missed 9 tackles, that doesn't include the moments where he took himself out of position. And in coverage, Jaylon Smith has not been good. And that's been a major problem for me, and I know at least some of you guys watching out there. I do think the Cowboys would be open to finding a trade partner for Jaylon Smith, despite the way the Joneses feel about him, despite the fact that they gave him the number 9, which I think was a sign that they're not going to trade him because, again, I don't think anybody wanted him. Long term, this linebacker room is going to look different because Micah Parsons, and I think Jabril Cox too maybe, are hopefully going to be your stud pieces long term. You're going to use 2 linebackers the vast majority of the time. I think it's Parsons and Cox, and I think in reality, for the roles that both guys are at their best in playing, Micah Parsons is going to get more opportunities short-term and definitely long-term than Jaylon Smith will. Now, FANSIDED also threw out 4 other cut/trade candidates. Wanted to go rapid fire here. Leighton Vander Esch, I do think has a bit more trade value right now than Jaylon Smith, even though Jaylon I thought was better down the stretch last year. But you're selling low. I think the Cowboys are going to bank on one or both those guys improving their stock for next year. Tristan Hill makes sense. Dorrance Armstrong makes sense. Randy Gregory, that's stupid. He's going to start. That is a erroneous inclusion by FANSIDED. Gregory is not a cut or trade candidate unless something bad happens off the field, which again, no reason to think that. It makes no sense including him on that list.